So today I'm going to do my first stream in a couple days. I should have still done some, even if I didn't do much commentary, because I got some of my teeth removed, so now it was harder to talk and stuff. But even then, I should have done something. And now it's a little better, but I'm not going to be able to talk too loud either. Still, I'm being careful. So because of that, maybe I'll talk less. You can just enjoy the drive, or I'll talk quieter, which will probably get overshot by the sound of the car. So kind of look at absolutist philosophy a little bit like you're trying to find the deeper meaning or value in everything. So you could be doing anything, like, oh, I'm just driving right now or something, right? That's what I call the initial mind versus the, like the larger process or self-awareness, is that, most people, or whatever, the value, and that seems to maybe make sense, right? But the problem with looking at everything at face value is that the way it came to be is not at face value. Right, whether it be nature, even though that doesn't have like a intentionality to it the same way, but nature is very nuanced and layered. So if you look at it at face value, oh, this mushroom looks good, but it's actually poisonous, right? So you can't take everything at face value. You have this disease, which again, you need sometimes external help to do that, but to know that. But what I'm saying is, you don't take everything at face value, even in nature, right? Something might look harmless, but is harmful. Something might look harmful, but is harmless, right? A little spider could kill, mosquito could be more dangerous than a tiger, could kill you with the West Nile virus, or some big, some big animal could be harmless. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't want to say the wrong one, but like something that looks very threatening could actually be harmless to you. So you can't take everything at face value in that sense. There could be a disease that you have that doesn't hurt at all. You can't feel it and it'll still kill you. Even like nature's way of, in a way, tricking you, like, oh, sugar tastes good, but then if you eat too much it's bad. Or vegetables, for whatever reason, our modern way of thinking, oh, they taste bad. In part because we're sort of used to and spoiled by other kind of foods, but like why do vegetables taste bad if they're good for you? But it's more that they're just not bad for you the way that a lot of what we eat is. So as I always say, everything mass produced suffers inequality for it. Like the kind of food you get isn't because it's the highest quality, it's because it's the easiest, cheapest to produce or mass produce, right? There's other incentives that go into it. And so one of the other aspects is the fact that like you wouldn't take society at face value either, in the sense that you wouldn't take society at face value. Or you shouldn't, because again, if you take nature at face value, you'll suffer from the things I just described, potentially, and if you take society at face value, you'll suffer from something else, which I call rule by omission protocol, basically. But effectively what it means is what you're looking at is carefully curated by other people with intentionality, which even nature doesn't have that layer to it, right? It might deceive you, but it's not doing it to deceive you, it just happens to work that way, right? Like you might have a disease that you don't know about, or you might have, something harmful that is subtle, right? The intentionality isn't there, but you still would be weary about being fooled by it, basically. Whereas here, with society, it is carefully curated, crafted, over generations, over eras, over societies, of different techniques that work to try to control people, of different psychological processes that are used on you, right? So like even advertising, if you take an ad at face value, oh, it's just funny, oh, it's just silly, haha. But you don't realize the cynicality, and if you were there to witness the origin of it, you might be more cynical. You don't realize how much, maybe deep down you do, but how much thought and corporate kind of incentives and, you know, psychology goes into it. Like every frame they planned out, everything they kind of put through these cynical think tanks with corporate incentives, with psychological manipulation, all these kind of things that they're putting into it. You want to pretend and be naive, like, oh, that's not happening, and you just take everything at face value. That seems comforting, but the reality is that if you take it at face value, you're doing a service to it. Because now it's like, oh, you can be controlled by it because the people who made it put more thought into it than you do as you're observing it. So they put in careful thought, consideration, curation. They use expert psychological techniques. They use, you know, corporate lingo, all these kind of things that they're doing with intentionality, right? That will affect you on a subconscious level, that will, you know, that have some thought put into them. But then if you just take it at face value, you're being controlled by it. So the only difference is be aware of it. Okay, be aware of what went into it. Even if you weren't there exactly to see it, you know that, okay, they spent millions of dollars on this ad and to run it and all that, and they spent so much time and effort to put it together, and they're sitting in a boardroom and they're coming up with cynical ideas to try to get a response and reaction, and, you know, the incentive to sell the product and to use insidious psychological manipulation techniques and things like that. You know, I'm not saying even whether there's anything wrong with that, like that's the way it works. But if you were aware of that process at all times, like, oh, this is what went into it, so then you would be weary of it, right, and not take it at face value the same way that, like in social interaction, you think, oh, somebody's reading from a script, so now you're a little weary of that. Or like somebody, I don't know, like you would question their performative aspects if they're not, they seem disingenuous, or they seem like, oh, look how much effort they're putting into it. So if that, then you would question it, like, oh, they lack ability, or you wouldn't trust them or something, or they have some incentive, right? But if the same amount of effort is put, or even more, they have entire teams of people to try to control you and influence you, but because you don't see that directly, you just accept it at face value. So again, if it's out of sight, out of mind, they can rule you by omission the way that I've talked about. It's the same process. Like if you saw me and I'm standing there, it's like, oh, I'm thinking for a long period of time to answer something or to do something. Oh, you'll think I'm stupid, right? Or oh, you'll project that I have some negative, nefarious intention, right? Whether that's true or not, that same thing could be present, but you just don't see them doing it, right? It'll be people in corporate, secret, private offices and doing what they're doing, but with all those incentives that you don't see, what you don't hear behind closed doors, that ultimately is used to influence you. Right, so that's the point. If you allow a process that is carefully curated and has tremendous amount of effort and thought put into it, if you allow that, or if you take that at face value, now you're allowing it to control you because they put more thought into it than you do, right, when you receive it. So you take it at face value, like, oh, look at this cool thing, as if it was, again, just something you see in nature, or just something incidental, something that just happens to be. But it's not. It's something artificial, it's man-made, it's made with intentionality, it's made with a great amount of incentives and, you know, again, like research and psychological techniques and all these different things put into it. If you're actively aware of that, you would be much more weary about it. And the other thing is that, when you talk about the face value thing, it applies to society as a whole. Like, you would take, this is kind of what you're trained to do somewhat in society. Oh, take everything at face value and some of this human propaganda. But the problem is that then that's used to ultimately control you, because you take everything at face value but then realize, oh, it's just some dictator who's setting this in place, or it's just the government that's setting this in place, and flawed, subjective humans with their own incentives and whatnot. So, again, you would never take anything at face value. It's a process that's used to control you. It's maybe, right, that would be the way of doing it, because you have, rather than treating it as an absolute or a default, you would treat it in that manner. Like, again, if you react to a process that's carefully curated and meticulously crafted, right, with so much effort and money and resources and research and psychological techniques and incentives and bureaucracy and all this kind of thing, ages of kind of Machiavellian sort of mentality in a way. If you take that at face value, it's like, oh, the world is just beautiful and everything's perfect and everybody's nice, and that's kind of the way that you want to think, but you don't realize what controls you. But meanwhile, the government is using your tax money to kill people overseas or whatever it is that you would object to. So this is where the middle class kind of plays dumb in society. Is like, they want to act innocent, but they still want to benefit from it. So ultimately, again, you're in a position where you can just easily be controlled by it, because you put less thought into it than they do, or you don't put any thought into it and they put tremendous thought into it. So you want to be naive and act like, oh no, there's nothing going on with that, there's no process at work. But deep down, or upon any close examination or awareness, or if you were actively aware of the origin of the process, you would then question it, right? If you saw how that same process came to be, you would question it. I could do it right in front of you. Okay, I'm sitting here making an ad out in public, and not even just shooting the ad, but like I have a group of people sitting around, and they're cynically going over things like, let's use this psychological technique, let's use this psychological research, let's do this for this amount of seconds because we have this incentive, we want to sell this product, or we want to, push them towards this thing. If you saw them discussing that and doing that, then now when you see the ad, that'll be in your mind like, oh, wait a second, people don't want to be aware of how they're controlled, right? So now, but I don't want to buy it now because I know that that's what they put into it. So the same exact thing, the same exact ad would be fine if you're not aware of that, but it's bad if you are aware of that, even if the process that went into making it is exactly the same. So again, when you take something for granted or at face value that was carefully curated and crafted, whether it be government, whether it be society, whether it be certain business, whether it be certain ads and stuff, then you're doing a service to it, because you're not holding it accountable and you're allowing it to basically control you, because again, you're not aware of the nature of the process or even accounting for it, that it is a process. So that leaves you vulnerable to be controlled by it, versus they're actively using a process with intentionality, right? So either way, it's the exact same process. So that's the problem, like with even social expectations, is like two people could do the exact same thing, right? Do or say the exact same thing, but one of them is regarded positively, one of them is regarded negatively. This is a sign of a subversive state, a state in which you're not really valuing things fully, right? It's more about appearances or coping with the contrived state that you're in and the cognitive dissonance of it. So you're conceding to a non-value state in which nothing is valued fully and truly. Not yourself, not anything else, not everything, anything, right? So in that state, now it becomes like what I call a contest of contrivance, like who can put up appearances the best, or overcompensate, or frame things a certain way. So what it means is that basically I want to see this truck in front of me get a ticket for going 40 and 20 zone in a school zone. But what it means is that you're in a non-value subversive state that's sort of arbitrary and reactionary. So now it's like You treat it as absolute, you don't question it, you don't think about it. You basically give up trying to value things fully and truly, which is kind of how society tries to break you down in a way, right? You don't even try to fully value something, whether it's yourself, whether it's someone else, anything else, amalgam theory, it doesn't matter, right? So what you do now is you value appearances and overcompensations and such like that, right? Because what you're doing is I kind of forgot the one point, like, you're conceding to a non-value subversive state, and now it becomes all about appearances. And so what that means is that like if, again, two people say the exact same thing, but one of them says it kind of bluntly or without any undue emphasis, and that's bad. Or then one of them says it nicely or sweetly or whatever, and now it's good. So what you're showing is that the state that you're in, or what's going on, is not something of actual value or standard or consistency. It's something that's bypassing your critical thinking or appealing to your ego or emotion. The same exact thing could be happening, but one of them is presented at face value as it is, right, without any special framing or dressing up, then it's bad. So in your opinion, that same process is bad. But if somebody's nice about it, now that process is good. So the fact that the process needs that overcompensation shows you that it's a flawed process, it's a subversive process, it's a non-value process. Right, so you can overcompensate as much as you want, but then you're doing that in service of that, and even in service of a subversive, right, lower value kind of state. And so what that means is that you're basically going to care about appearances because the reality underneath is bad or needs to be covered up for or overcompensated for. The issue then becomes on the initial minded level that this appearance is bad, let's make fun of this person's appearance, let's focus on the appearance is all we care about, right? But the appearance wouldn't matter if what was underneath was actually sound and solid and not of conflict. So like, you're making the issue about the overcompensation, right? Like, the issue is, somebody wasn't nice enough to adequately overcompensate for this flawed process. Not that the process is ever flawed, or that, again, a sound process wouldn't need that. You wouldn't need any social interaction at all, or you wouldn't need anything, because you could take it at face value and then it would be a sound, solid process. There wouldn't be any imbalance, there wouldn't be any undue emphasis, there wouldn't be any social contrivance, there wouldn't be any appeal to ego, gratification, things like that. So because of this, you have the fact that you need that shows you an imbalance in that. And then one of the other things is that, again, so you care about the appearance or the form of something, right, which is only necessary to maintain a subversive non-value state. And then there's like a human propaganda in that, like, but you're doing it for the sake of the collective, for other people. but then you don't do amalgam theory, and you kind of do it in a way, again, in service of contrivance, in service of a specific contrivance, say that is actually antithetical to people in other ways. Like, there's just a pretense to maintain a certain overextended way of life, standard of living for yourselves, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the pretense that you value people, or that's why you're doing it, is not. Why not sacrifice everything then for other people? Sacrifice 2 meals a day to feed somebody else. You won't do that, but you'll pretend like, oh, we're gonna be all nice about it, about something, to try to reinforce it. Like, so again, that thought experiment is just two people say the exact same thing, but because one of them just says it bluntly with no emphasis, the false negative of neutrality, that's somehow bad or rude or negative, or you dislike that, right? So it's bad if somebody says something bluntly, or just, again, neutrally, and it's good if they say it with undue emphasis or some artificial element. They appeal to your ego or your emotion, etc. Right? The same exact thing is being said. So it's that person's fault for not adequately framing or overcompensating for the process. Never the process itself to blame. Right? The process itself is perfect and absolute, but it only comes into question. So the reality is that what's happening is it's simply revealing to you the nature of the process. But that person might be being more honest, or again, by not saying anything at all, they let the process speak for itself. But then it's their fault for not overcompensating for the process, or covering it up, or again, appropriately framing it with appearance, etc. It's their fault for not maintaining your illusion, right? But really, they could be doing it deliberately with intention too, of like, okay, they're not trying to overcompensate for the process. They're trying to show true value, objectivity, the true nature of the process, and then you can decide for yourself. But instead of seeing that, you condemn them and say, oh, you broke the illusion of this flawed process, so it's your fault, right? Even though you're not doing anything, in fact, you're doing nothing. So by simply letting it speak for itself, you project back and reflect back the nature of that process, or their nature, right? Like, oh, this is what would be negative. This is what would be negative if we thought about it, or this is what would be negative if we, didn't overcompensate with appearances, etc. So what it means is, just that it would be bad if you were aware of it. So it becomes a contest again of trying to not be aware of it. Don't think, distract yourself, overcompensate. That might seem to be a coping mechanism that's good and desired, but really, it's like you're reinforcing any state. So that kind of explains human history. It could be World War II Germany, it could be the fall of the Roman Empire, it could be China right now. So it's more important to cope with that and keep up appearances, and let's attack the one who breaks the illusion of this false absolute. Not that nothing is absolute. So now it becomes, again, if it's a sound process, that part wouldn't be necessary. But then when you have the stimuli preservation kind of the way that people overextend and have a certain population and style of life, now it's like, well, in order to maintain this thing that already exists that you didn't create, now you have to shut your mind off and kind of just go along with it and overcompensate. But that assumes that that's absolute, or that's really what you would choose, right? So you're always kind of, oh, well, you owe it to that society because that's where you grew up, but you didn't choose that. You didn't have control over that. It even prevented you from being free and doing anything else. And then, now you get to the intentionality of like, so you would never be able to change that. Your only goal is to reinforce and overcompensate for that false absolute half-mass state. And so now, simple initial versus larger process at work, that the same exact process is happening, but it's bad if you're aware of it. It's not bad if you're not. So it's something that requires constant reinforcement, constant overcompensation, constant distraction, constant appearances, right? So a good example is like the monopolization of nature itself. These big corporations take monopoly over all natural resources of significance everywhere, right? That's not something you would necessarily be okay with, or maybe you are, but that's not something you would necessarily be okay with. But then in order to specify it, we got to dress it up. Well, we'll put it in a nice little grocery store. We'll have all these people be all nice to you, right? And therefore, now it's okay. Because this cashier at Walmart, or now it's going to be self-checkout anyway, but like, because they were all nice to you, that makes it okay that this corporation is monopolizing nature itself and, through other producers, etc. But still, it's okay that they're doing that, putting mom and pop shops out of business and destroying the local economy originally, like the way that, kind of monopolizing everything that way, and also the producers monopolizing everything in nature. That's okay as long as they're nice about it. But if they weren't nice, now you'll take issue with it. So it's kind of like, you would have issue with the nature of the process, but it's more about just covering it up and overcompensating for it with appearances, which is like, again, covering up the symptom, not the disease, right? And it's by your own standard. If you're okay with everything, then you shouldn't need that overcompensation. And if you're not okay with it, and therefore require that overcompensation, it's not that it should come down to, this person overcompensated well and this one didn't, so it's their fault, or their appearance is breaking the illusion of something. It's that the process shouldn't require that if it's a sound process. So it's clearly not as absolute as you're made to believe or want to believe. And then the other thing is the fact that if it would be a flawed process by your own definition, that's where social contrivance and appearances and overcompensation, undue emphasis, right, emotion, ego, all of that is the only way to control you, because if the process is sound, none of that is necessary. That means it's a subversive non-value state, which in turn can be arbitrary. Then, you can do anything and get away with it, like throughout history, as long as you keep up good appearances, then the reality doesn't matter. The nature of the process doesn't matter. Right, so the fact that it comes down to that, that's kind of like the modern mentality, and again, you're expected to just go along with any era. So you would say, you give up on value. Yeah, let corporation monopolize nature itself. Let them have monopoly over things that nobody really can own inherently, but we just accept the fact, it's already established, it's already preconceived. Now you have to earn some back of what was already free to everyone. Like, you were born into this world and all these things are already established, but that's somehow held over your head. Like, look, your parents are hardworking and have money and you're not, even though you're not allowed to even, right? But so that somehow validates them. It never validated them, you just never had the chance to. And you didn't even, to the extent that you would have the chance to, you're even prevented from doing things freely, right? And the same thing like with corporations, like, look, these corporations own this and own that, and they get to monopolize nature itself, but you never even had the chance to do that. So now it's like, now you have to work your way up and earn back some of that nature that would be free to everybody naturally. But you have to earn it back through their system, right? So it's like, you never agreed to do that. You never said, okay, you can have monopoly over all of nature. So it's something that's already established that then you work in service of to try to overcompensate and reinforce their subversive state that's already established. So it's not even like an anti-negative perspective on it. It's just whatever is established is already established. You didn't create that process. You didn't have a chance to, decide on that process. You didn't choose that. You were simply born into it. And now it's a matter of whether you reinforce it or you don't. and that process will use the fact that it's already established to validate itself. But again, it's like, oh, look, this big corporation owns all this land and you don't, but you're 5 years old, like, so, but you're still subject to it. So you're subject to things you didn't control and that you can't control and didn't choose, right? And then when you finally are able to have more of an impact, the influence is so overextended that you go along with it no matter what. So yeah, that's the cognitive dissonance element, is that you don't need social contrivance. It might seem positive, like, oh, look, this person being nice, but it's actually negative because it's reinforcing a subversive non-value state, the fact that it's necessary, right? Otherwise, everything can speak for itself and be at face value. So it means that something's being covered up or overcompensated for that would be a flawed process. And even, again, social contrivance, undue emphasis, ego, emotion, things like that. Those things might seem to be positive on the surface level, but if you're made aware of them, you would reject them, or that you're being controlled by them, or so you kind of want to live. It's the initial minded basis that I talk about. Like, you want to be controlled by it ultimately, or you want the illusion to be maintained, but you don't want to be made aware of how you're being controlled by it. So again, one person doesn't use appearances or social contrivance or emotion or ego or emphasis, etc., to control you or deceive you, right? One person doesn't do that, and they're bad, it's their fault, right? The other person does, and that's a good thing, right? So it's like a coping halfway mechanism, like, well, you helped to overcompensate for this flawed contrivance state, so now you're going to desire that and praise that person. So it's like, it seems good, right? It's like you smoke a cigarette and it relieves the urge you had to smoke. So it seems like a good thing, but the very fact that you're smoking at all is a bad thing, right? That's the cancerous issue of, like, so yes, the social contrivance might seem to be positive as an overcompensation for a flawed process, but it's not addressing the flawed process. In fact, it's even reinforcing it. Right, and so that, by that logic, that's the narrow, egotistical basis, non-standard, non-credible, arbitrary, interchangeable basis that people have, which is like, that they'll just insist upon things that are familiar to them, or they're basically just insisting upon themselves. And there's like this, again, humanist propaganda that's kind of phony. Like, oh, that's what makes you human, or that must make something valuable. That the emotion and ego and emphasis that you place on things just because they're around you, like your family, even though you didn't choose them, is the most valuable thing. Or the love of your life, who happen to be in the same geographical area as you, therefore is not an absolute, because right, if you had just lived somewhere else, you would have ended up with somebody else. So it's all these absolutes that are based in what I call just the non-basis of self. There really is no criteria behind it besides its proximity to you, right? Just that it's near you, that it's something you've experienced, therefore something you're familiar with, therefore it has value based on that, which isn't really any standard or criteria. So if you were just not familiar with that, because you were exposed to it by media or something you didn't even choose necessarily when you were younger often, right? If you were exposed to it when you were younger, if you were exposed to something else, you would value that. Or if you weren't exposed to the thing that you are valuing, you wouldn't value it as much or at all. So, in other words, you're not operating on any credible standard or criteria. You're just simply taking what you've experienced and treating it as absolute, or right, insisting upon your own ignorance, almost like this is what little you do know or what little you have experienced, and so you give a special emphasis just because of that, not because of any actual, again, standard or merit behind it. So yeah, you want to be controlled by the process, or you want the nature to be alleviated alleviated and overcompensated for, but the fact that that's necessary shows you it's a flawed process. So you attack the individual who either, again, just doesn't overcompensate for it, or even by choice wants to reveal the truth and the nature of the process to you, but you make them the enemy, right? So you want to live in like this state of constant denial, because otherwise, if you thought objectively about it, you wouldn't live the exact life you do, or you might choose something else, or you might be more free, right? Objective thought wouldn't lead to one specific uniform state for everybody that you're kind of pressured to be a part of. So the fact that not thinking is necessary is not credible, or the fact that constant overcompensation and reinforcement is necessary is an issue as well. Right, it is certainly lacking in credibility, and so that credibility then in turn means that it can't be used as a basis to tell others what to do, or so it's kind of like the one seeking objective truth and reality and not contrivance or overcompensation would be like that, a subjective human being, etc., right? But then nobody else does either, right? It's not that it'll be specified to them like they're the problem, right? But it's that nobody has credibility, so they would want to remove the need for it themselves, or like, so nobody should be in a position of authority, right? They would be the type, like they're in a position just so they can remove the need for that position. So they want to remove that thing, and it's no longer necessary, instead of taking pride in it or reinforcing it or perpetuating it. So, and that's often what human pretense of value is like sort of the, like what I call the longevity process, but then it's very inconsistent. All of human achievement is nothing more than reacting and relieving things that are inherent, that you didn't choose, right, etc. But this wasn't a bad discussion. I'm trying not to talk too much or talk too loudly. I think that's good. I'm going to listen back to it a little bit.